An emotional Prime Minister Anthony Albanese releases the wording of the voice referendum. Two of Australia's biggest energy users invest to develop greener electricity. And coffee shops boom in China and Starbucks wants to win the battle. It's Friday, the 24th of March, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, I just mentioned greener electricity, so it is a good time to be talking to Lisa Chiba, the Managing Director of Momentum Energy.
That's right, Michael. Momentum Energy, of course, is a retail arm of Hydro Tasmania. We talk about the retail electricity market and the need to get renewable energy into the system. It's a really fascinating chat.
Yeah, it's really good. Worth sticking around for. Momentum Energy, of course, is a great supporter of Fear and Greed. The main story this morning, Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese fought back tears yesterday. He was standing alongside Indigenous leaders to announce the wording of the voice referendum. This is after weeks of debate.
Yes, the federal cabinet approved the final wording that will be inserted into the Constitution if the voice referendum, expected in October, passes. It will read, and I quote, "A proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the first peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve this proposed alteration?" That's what we're going to be asked. Now, Albanese said a body, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, will be able to advise executive government as well as federal parliament if the referendum is successful, but the parliament will have the power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers and procedures. The Prime Minister was emotional yesterday, saying he felt the weight of responsibility of running a referendum. Remember, mostly they fail. He said efforts up until now to close the gap between Indigenous Australians and other Australians have not worked, and that the country cannot afford to keep doing and failing at the same thing.
Sean, I thought Indigenous Affairs Minister Linda Burney actually put it pretty well when she said that yesterday was a truly historic day and that the starting gun has now been fired.
Yes, I agree, Michael. What will be crucial to the referendum's success or otherwise is what the Liberal Party decides. It's very difficult to pass anything around the Constitution if it hasn't got bipartisan support. Yesterday, opposition leader Peter Dutton said he wanted more detail about the referendum, which has been his constant line ever since the voice has been discussed. He said the Liberals have been constructive with government this week in relation to behind-the-scenes mechanics, but that wasn't an indication of its support or otherwise. He also called for the government to release the Solicitor General's advice on the wording. Michael, there will be lots of argy-bargy around this. What the Libs end up deciding to do will be critical to the success, and there'll be plenty of debate around it.
Yeah, certainly. And it feels as though if they decide to support it, it will still be a fairly kind of eventful 6 months or so, but it may well avoid the heavily political debate that we could otherwise have.
Let's hope so. Let's hope that the referendum is voted up or down on its merits, nothing else.
Indeed. All right. How did local markets perform yesterday, Sean?
S&P ASX 200 finished the day down 0.7% to 6,969 points. The materials stocks led the way lower, while the energy and financials also underperformed. About 3/4 of the top 200 ended the day in the red, Michael. The big miners struggled, led lower by Fortescue Metals, which was down 3%. The banks were lower. National Australia Bank was the worst of the big four, at least. It was down 1%. Macquarie Group finished off closer to 2%. Others to underperform include QBE Insurance, Cochlear, Mineral Resources and South 32. Now, it was the defensive stocks that outperformed, companies like CSL, Wesfarmers, Telstra, Woolworths and Coles. And Michael, in the bond market, investors are now confident that the Reserve Bank's tightening cycle is over following a rate hike in the US. We'll talk about that in a moment. Bond traders have priced in no interest rate hike in 11 days' time when the Reserve Bank board meets, but market economists still disagree. They reckon a rate rise is on the way, 25 basis points.
Yeah, Sean, you mentioned the rate hike in the US, and yesterday morning the Federal Reserve lifted the benchmark interest rate 25 basis points.
It did, but signalled the central bank is thinking differently about future rises. The federal funds rate target range is now 4.5% to 5%. It's the highest since 2007. The phrase ongoing rate increases is no longer in the communique released with the increase, something Fed Chair Jerome Powell noted. He said that a tightening in credit conditions as a result of what's happening in the US banking system could actually substitute for rate increases. That fed through to the market. Wall Street closed lower yesterday morning. The news also sent cryptocurrencies down after their fairly strong run in recent sessions, and the Aussie dollar got a burst, or more correctly, the US dollar fell. The Aussie's currently trading above 67 US cents. Oil prices have also come off somewhat, with Brent crude trading around 76 US dollars a barrel and gold's at 1,975 US dollars an ounce.
Sean, I'm almost a little bit hesitant to ask this.
Oh, no, go for it, please.
Because it may well put you on the spot, and it could also make me look a little bit foolish. So there's a chance that neither of us are going to come out of this looking particularly good. The Federal Reserve, how often does it meet? How often do they potentially increase rates?
So it's either 6 or 7 times a year. I just can't remember which one. It's not as often as Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank here meets every month except for January, so 11 times. The Fed is at 6 or 7. I can't remember.
Why would that be? I mean, it feels very kind of sporadic, I suppose. I think there's a fear and greed campaign in this to get the
Fed to meet more often, more rate rises, all for it, absolutely.
Just to get a bit of alignment between Australia and the US, you know.
So part of the reason that you see the Fed lifting 50 basis points in Australia, the Reserve Bank lifting 25 basis points last year at least, was that the Fed just didn't meet as often. So when you don't meet as often, you have to lift rates by larger increments. Now, there have been circumstances when the Fed and the Reserve Bank have lifted rates outside their regular meetings, but not very often. Actually, Michael, I've just been prompted here. It's 8 meetings per year. There you go.
All right, 8 meetings per year. There we go. I have just learned something. Thank you very much, Sean, for teaching me that.
Well, I just learned that too because someone else prompted me on that one.
Oh, there we go. Good old Google. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, BHP is thinking about building a prototype electric smelter somewhere in Australia as it pushes to deliver on the promise of low-emission steel made from Pilbara iron ore.
Yes. Now, steel makers emit a lot of energy. They use a lot of energy, and therefore it emits a lot of carbon. The big Australian said it has struck an agreement with engineering firm Hatch to design an electric smelting furnace pilot in Australia, moving steelmaking away from coking coal and natural gas to smelting using electricity and hydrogen. It's kind of like the holy grail for steelmakers, according to a story in The Australian. BHP says electric arc furnaces, which are touted as one potential solution, have only limited suitability. The goal is to develop an electric smelting furnace that has greater flexibility in terms of the feedstock. See how they go there.
And Sean, Origin Energy is considering developing an offshore wind project in the New South Wales Hunter region.
That's right. Australia has earmarked developing offshore wind as central to its ambition to achieve 80% renewable electricity generation by 2030. Now, according to Financial Review, Victoria has emerged as the epicentre of Australia's offshore wind industry, but Origin has begun early development plans for the Hunter. Remember, Federal Energy Minister Chris Bowen earlier this year proposed the Hunter as Australia's second offshore wind region after Gippsland. Anyway, plenty going on there in wind farming.
Right now, Sean, it's the New South Wales state election this weekend with the incumbent, Liberal Premier Dominic Perrottet, up against Labor's Chris Minns. After 12 years, the polls suggest that the people of New South Wales may well have a new Premier by weekend's end.
It has been a very hard-fought campaign, and while Minns is in front, Perrottet has clawed back ground in recent days. It'll be tight, we know that. Around 1/3 of votes lie in the suburbs west and southwest of Sydney, so that's pretty much where the election will be won. Places like Holsworthy, Parramatta, Penrith, those sorts of areas. The campaign has been fought over public ownership, the pokies and cashless gambling, spending in health and education, including a government-funded future fund for kids, infrastructure upgrades, anti-transgender rallies, toll roads, public transport and staff shortages, the shadow of former Premier Gladys Berejiklian, and all sorts of things, Michael. Now, we have a policy at Fear and Greed of not supporting any party, but vote. And vote wisely and make sure you're informed when you vote, because voting really matters. Good luck to both Dominic Perrottet and Chris Minns.
Now, Sean, there's some very interesting research from LinkedIn, and I'll be very interested to hear your take on this. 2/3 of people working from home don't think that they are hurting their careers by doing so, but around 50% feel that they actually need to overcompensate to show they are serious about work. I don't know why I paused so much and directed overcompensating towards you there, Sean, but please go on.
No, but it is interesting. When I read this, I thought that's exactly what I've done. I mean, I think most of us do it. You think, I'm working from home, I better make sure I'm working hard. And it's kind of a bit ridiculous. Anyway, the survey of more than 1,000 workers says people are definitely open to going back into the office, or more open than they were a year ago. Around 1/3 of workers are in the office 3 days and more than a quarter 2 days. Michael, you fit outside that particular category. No surprises. Monday and Friday are the least popular office days. People want to head back into the office for a bunch of reasons: social interactions, to build work relationships and have more efficient face-to-face meetings. There's another trend among managers, which I love. It's called loud leaving. That's when the boss makes a bit of a song and dance about leaving the office at a sensible time to pick up the kids or do the groceries or whatever. The idea is that loud leaving makes it easier for staff to do the exact same thing. And nearly 50% of survey respondents had experienced loud leaving recently. Michael, storming out, is that loud leaving?
Yes.
It is?
Yep. And which is good then, because it means then that you encourage other people to also storm out.
Storm out. That's right.
In support. Look, you know what, Sean? I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I have a feeling that in tomorrow's weekend edition, this story is going to be appearing, and I'm going to have some strong opinions on this, particularly this idea of heading back into the office for social interactions and other rubbish. Goodness me.
You'll have strong opinions and I'll have the exact opposite opinions.
Well, it should be a good competition. And of course, our weekend edition is very competitive. And we rope our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang, into adjudicating and deciding a winner. So it can get a little bit fiery.
We do need to give a shout out to Adam, because he gets up very early like we do. And he's the person that prompted me about the 8 Federal Reserve meetings, because he's always listening in the back, lurking in the background. And I'd just like to say, Adam, great work. Love your work. Fantastic judge. And if you want to look favourably on me tomorrow, that's okay with me.
Oh, so that's just sickening, Sean. Whereas I was going to give him a new nickname of Adam Lurker Lang, because he's lurking in the background. But I suspect that wouldn't actually help my case tomorrow when we do battle on the weekend edition. But let's move on, Sean. Australia's fleet of MRH-90 Taipan Army transport helicopters have been grounded after 2 soldiers suffered minor injuries when their chopper crash landed into the water on the New South Wales south coast.
10 personnel were on board the helicopter as they conducted nighttime counter-terrorism drills at Jervis Bay when it made an emergency landing about 9 p.m. on Wednesday. Now, Defence Minister Richard Marles said the main rotor lost power and praised the crew for a textbook response, managing to ditch the chopper without loss of life. The injuries were minor. 1 soldier swallowed seawater, another bumped their head. An investigation will be launched into the cause of the incident. The MRH-90 helicopter has had trouble with its operations in the past, and it has been grounded 9 times previously. The government earlier this year said it would replace them with US-made Black Hawk choppers at a cost of $3 billion.
Sean, Australia's biggest pharmaceutical wholesaler, Sigma Healthcare, made a small profit during the past half year, but has warned of tough times ahead with acute labour shortages, higher freight and energy prices, inflation and interest rate increases. That's quite a few challenges.
It is. The group, which owns MCal Chemists as well, has paid back debt in response to the Reserve Bank's 10 rate rises that hurt earnings. Sigma made $1.8 million, just $1.8 million for the year to the end of January. At least it was a profit, while revenue was up 6% on the back of purchases of rapid antigen tests and COVID-19 antiviral medication. This is a kind of interesting sector. Freight costs are a big item for pharmaceutical wholesalers because under the community service obligation arrangement with the federal government, distributors like Sigma must supply the full range of PBS medicines to pharmacies across Australia within 72 hours, regardless of location or cost. Now, the government pays $200 million to a bunch of companies to do this, but it is still a massive logistical exercise, particularly during COVID, particularly when freight costs are so expensive to actually get medications to rural, regional, and particularly remote Australia. Fascinating sector, this one.
Yeah, it really is. And another to report yesterday, Sean, was Soul Patts as well as associated company Brickworks.
Yeah, Soul Patts is an investment company and its half-year net profit jumped 167%. That's obviously on the back of better investments. As a result, it boosted its dividend. Soul Patts is a major shareholder in Brickworks. Guess what Brickworks does, Michael? You'd love this one.
I'm going to take a punt and say they might operate in the brick sector.
Yeah, they make bricks.
Oh, phew. God, the pressure was on there, wasn't it, Sean?
Well, you hate companies that don't do what their name says. And Brickworks is the ultimate company for you because it's Australia's biggest brick maker. Anyway.
Yeah, better than that Silver Lake Resources that's a gold miner.
Yeah. Like gold and silver do tend to go together. But still.
Yeah, but one is gold in colour and one is silver in colour. And you cannot tell me they're the same thing, Sean.
No, one's first, one's second. We know that. Anyway, Brickworks posted a jump in profit. Chief Executive Lindsay Partridge said the group continues to experience strong demand, but a sharp slowdown in housing construction and renovations is likely towards the end of this year. There's a backlog of work stemming from tradie shortages that will provide a short-term buffer of about 6 months. But once we get to the end of 2023, the sector will be in trouble, he reckons.
All right, moving on to international news now. And Starbucks, Sean, is going big into China, planning to open a store in China every 9 hours to reach 9,000 locations by 2025. That is huge.
It is ridiculous. It currently has about 6,000 locations, and its famed chief executive, a guy called Howard Schultz, is about to step down, but he wants one last crack at the world's fastest growing large coffee market. Did you know there are 100,000 coffee stores in China, coffee shops in China, about 65,000 in Japan, and less than 40,000 in the US? Probably about 1,000 that actually create decent coffee in the US.
Yes, well said. Good work.
So China's a huge, huge market. The global coffee chain Starbucks is also opening its first roasting plant in China, and it'll be its first in Asia as well. China provided close to 10% of Starbucks' global revenue last year, although same-store sales late last year tumbled. They were down by about 25% or a bit more. There's plenty of competition in the Chinese market. Tim Hortons, a Canadian chain, has 600 stores. Lavazza has done a partnership with the crowd called the Yum China. They've got they're aiming for 1,000 stores by 2025. Luckin Coffee, I like that one, Luckin. Luckin Coffee is the market leader. It has more than 2,000 stores.
The Swiss government, Sean, has approved plans to legalise the consumption and sale of cannabis in Zurich in a trial that will assess the economic and health benefits of regulating supply of the recreational drug.
It's become a bit of a trend. Now, in Zurich, it's part of a 3.5-year scientific study starting this northern summer. About 2,100 residents of Zurich, which is Switzerland's biggest city, will be able to buy regulated doses of cannabis for personal use if they agree to answer a questionnaire every 6 months. Now, some European countries are following the lead of the US states, places like California, New York, in moving towards the liberalisation of laws on cannabis consumption. Germany is currently running a trial, for example. Now, Zurich is a city of 400,000 residents. About 13,000 residents are apparently regular users of cannabis, but certainly is a big trend. I was in New York late last year, Michael, and I think the thing that I walked away from, which I hadn't realised, is just how prevalent cannabis is in that state.
I love that the Swiss government is going to get you to answer a questionnaire every 6 months. I would love to know, first of all, what questions they're going to be asking on this questionnaire and whether they're expecting a change in the responses between the first time you answer them and then the 6-month mark. Are there questions like, has your consumption of potato chips increased dramatically? I'm assuming it's probably more scientific than that.
It's probably more scientific than that, but that would be a good judge. And when are they going to do it? Are they going to fill the questionnaire when they wake up at 7 a.m? Or is it just before they go to bed?
Oh, please. I hope it's the latter. All right. Last one, Sean. British billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe is planning to make a bid that would value England's Manchester United Football Club at more than £5 billion.
Yeah, so that's about 10 billion Aussie. And this story really is in honour of the fact that Ted Lasso is streaming again. Michael, I know it's close to your favourite show of recent years.
Series 3. I haven't watched it yet. Have you seen it yet?
I've seen the first episode only, but this is what made me think about this story. Now, if successful, it would be a record acquisition price for a sports team, according to the Financial Times. Ratcliffe is founder of the Ineos Chemicals empire. He's competing against a Qatari businessman, Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad Al Thani, for the takeover of the most successful English Premier League football club, i.e. Manchester United. The seller is the Glazer family. Now, they were among the first wave of foreign owners to buy into English football following Roman Abramovich's acquisition of West London rivals Chelsea FC back in 2003. Now, a full sale would beat the $4.65 billion, which is, 7 billion Aussie, paid by Rob Walton, heir to the Walmart retail fortune, to acquire the Denver Broncos American football franchise last year.
All right. Up next, Sean, is the Fear and Greed Daily interview, and your guest today is Lisa Chiba, the Managing Director of Momentum Energy.
Yes, all about what's happening with Momentum Energy and Hydro Tasmania. And we talk quite a bit about the actual market itself and how it's shifting and changing towards renewable energy. Fascinating chat.
Yeah, it's a really good one. It is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. And of course, Momentum Energy is a supporter of the podcast. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 24th of March, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.